Rajiv, try and say something now.
I can hear you.
Now I hear you. Now I'm on my phone.
Oh, okay, good.
I'm sorry about that. Sorry about that. What a mess.
Has
Okay.
has Avdesh also been able to find a solution?
Is he also having trouble? Oh dear.
Yeah, because my camera is very much visible on the Microsoft team, but somehow here I'm not able to find. Let me see.
Avdesh, you also want to try from your phone?
And the minute you try something that's not Microsoft, it works first time. And we can't hear you, Audish. I can't right now.
Can you hear me?
Yes, now I hear you and see you. But the question is whether you hear us. Is that the issue with you as well? You can't hear us.
Okay, we'll just do a quick check. Mr. Singh, can you hear us?
Anurag, can you hear us? Okay, good. Yes, you can. So enjoy.
We cannot hear you, Mr. Singh. Can you hear? Can you say something, please?
I think now you can hear me, right?
Yes, now
Yes.
we can.
Okay.
Mr. Jha, can you hear us?
Yes.
And we can hear you too. Paul, I think we can hear you. Can you say something?
I can say something. I can say anything. I can say a lot of things.
And Mr. Vij, I think we can
Yes,
hear and see you as well.
yes, you can hear me.
All good. I think we can start now.
But is Anurag also there? Can Anurag hear us and we can hear him? Anurag?
Yes. Yes.
Anurag? I think Anurag is not able to either hear us or he's.
But we just did a test and it worked well. I could hear him speak.
Anurag, we can't
And
hear you. But Anurag, his connection was doing all right.
maybe now, Anurag. Oh dear. He's logging out now. There we go. Anurag? Oh no, gone. Oh no, we lost Avajesh. Oh dear.
I hope I am audible. Rajiv, can you hear me?
Yes, yes, Avdesh, I can hear you.
Good.
But now I think Anurag is having some problem.
Yes, I can't hear Anurag.
Neither can I. Oh, yeah.
There are so many, meeting platforms, virtual meeting platforms. I mean, we don't know which one is.
I know it's getting tough to follow.
I wish we had that many EV car models available in India. Anurag is still trying.
I think so. I would suggest him to do it from the phone. Gaurav, Shinjo, what's the update? Is it looking like it's going to happen, or should we, the three of us, go ahead?
Paul, I think Srinjoy is saying that we can start.
Okay. Then let's do that. Then I'll try and do the context setting. Oh dear. Okay. Good. So Shinjo, you need to tell us when we're live and when it's gonna run.
Paul, we are live already.
There's Anurag.
We can't hear Anurag.
Paul, maybe you want to start.
Okay, I'll start. I can't even see we're live. I mean, something is going on. Well, welcome everyone who's tuned in. Sorry for the technical challenges we seem to be having. It's promising to be a very interesting session on sustainable urban mobility, specifically focusing on EV. And what we wanted to try to do today was to have a candid and an open chat with experts on the field. I think anybody who's tuned in today are aware of the policies that are there, the incentives that are there. But what we wanted to sort of get a feel of are some of the practical issues that might be there, get some live updates from projects on the ground as to what are some of the challenges, but also what are the opportunities in the EV space in India. I think we all agree that sustainability is in many ways a balance between environment, between economy, and also equity. And I think we all know that most of mobility today actually uses fossil fuels, and that's what we're trying to wean ourselves off in terms of a large carbon footprint. And EVs are coming out to be one of the main ways to address this challenge, and it's picked up pace in the last few years. There's also a lot of discussions going on about EVs, the economic ownership of EVs being now interesting compared to internal combustion engine vehicles and other mobility forms. And we're also moving to a space where electrical vehicles are now becoming something that is something for everyone and not only for the elite few, as it was in the introductory phase. And governments all over the world, and also India is no exception to that, is doing their bit to accelerate electric mobility by a variety of incentives and government policies and more. So I would like to welcome now the two experts that we've chosen to speak to today, who have very deep insights into what is happening on the ground in India in terms of EV projects. We have Rajiv Vij. He's heading Cars and Rent, a large fleet owner and service provider in the e-mobility space for a variety of clients. I know, Rajiv, you're moving away from internal combustion engines in your fleet, going towards e-mobility, and obviously facing some hurdles in that road. And to another part of the value chain of the e-mobility value chain, we have Avares Jha, who is heading Charge and Drive, part of Fortum, a Finnish organization, looking into and providing solutions to electromobility chargers, which I think is also one of the challenges in India today. So I think let's get into the chat as soon as we can. I don't know, Anurag, can we hear you now? No, I can't hear you. I can see you speaking, but I can't hear you, unfortunately. So maybe what I'll do is I will request maybe Rajiv to start off with what are some of the key challenges you're facing when you're looking at specifically implementing electromobility and projects, and you as a big user of e-mobility, what is it that is challenging you to be able to provide services on e-mobility platforms to your clients?
Thank you, Paul. And thank you for inviting me to this forum. Privilege to share my inputs and thoughts with everybody. In India, what has happened over the last 4 or 5 years is that some initial things happened over 3 4 years back. Uh, the transition to electric vehicles as far as two-wheelers, and in India we have a large number of two-wheelers. I mean, the total population of two-wheelers in India is probably close to 200 million vehicles, and three-wheelers, which are also a significant numbers, and which is probably unique to India. These two parts started transitioning some time back, and a significant transition has happened over the last 3 4 years. We have seen a lot of the new manufacturers for two wheelers coming in. Two wheeler industry in India for IC engine are also been a very very large industry. Three wheelers, of course, also a large part has started building up. Cars, however, which is the space where we operate, has been comparatively slower, and it has been slower for a variety of reasons. I think the most important reason today, if I can point out one reason, is that there are very few cars available. Till some time back, there were no good cars available. Now I think better cars have started becoming available, and when I say better cars, uh, particularly I refer to the technology aspect, because in electric vehicles, the kind of technology that you are making available in terms of the battery management system, and the battery range, these are important, and then the reliability of the vehicle, those are important, because for mobility you need a certain kind of quality of the vehicles. Now, as far as this is concerned, in the last 1 year, I think there has been significant improvement in the quality of vehicles. We earlier had cars which on the ground could at best give you about 70 kilometers of range in one full charge. But now we have cars which can give you 200 to 300 kilometers of range. There are also cars which have now been launched, which can give you more than 400 kilometers of range, and a car model that has been launched recently, an MPV model, which can give you a range of up to 500 kilometers. So that has happened. Uh, Even now, except for Tata Motors and MG Motors, which is assembling the vehicles here, the other manufacturers, including all the European manufacturers from Germany, Mercedes and BMW, everybody, they are largely bringing in vehicles which attract a higher level of duty, and therefore the initial price for those cars is significantly higher. That is not helping. But even then, the challenge in India today is not that the customer is not ready. Demand is not the problem for cars. There is a very large demand. In fact, you may be surprised to know that there is a queue for 2 to 3 months. And the improvement in terms of the number of vehicles that are getting sold is roughly about 100% growth from the previous year to this year. And previous year, of course, was also the pandemic year. But the expectation is that the next year, in terms of cars itself, we could expect to have a sale of about 70,000 to 80,000 cars in India, which would be EVs. And that would mean a significant jump in terms of the car sale in India. As far as the mobility industry is concerned, I think the government has been, of course, extremely supportive. There are price subsidies in terms of the FAME 2 scheme of the government. The government has also been trying to push the manufacturing of batteries and other components in India, and also push the manufacturers to manufacture vehicles in India. Has introduced a PLI scheme. We are told that the government has received proposals under the PLI scheme for investments of over $10 billion. So I think the industry is moving. A lot of the state governments are also pushing for transition. The government's organizations, the central entity that has been created to transition the mobility demand from the government and public sector undertakings, that organization is also doing a tremendous amount of work in terms of transitioning the three wheelers, the buses, and floating large tenders. So I think things are happening. I would leave the discussions on what's happening on the charging infrastructure to Avdesh, because his knowledge on that subject is far deeper than I would ever have. And incidentally, Avdesh is also Fortham is our partner for setting up the charging infrastructure for us. But I think in general in that sector, the speed at which the charging infrastructure is getting installed, it gives a lot of confidence that this area also will get addressed very soon. So I'm very excited about what's happening in this space. There are, of course, some challenges in terms of the funding available for electric vehicles. So financial institutions post pandemic are still reluctant to fund these vehicles. They have a challenge in terms of understanding as to what kind of residual values will be. And because there is no data about the past performance of electric vehicles in India, so some of those challenges are there. But I suppose things are improving. They are improving at a good pace, and there is every reason for the mobility industry to transition to electric vehicles over the next few years.
Okay, thank you, Rajiv, with the first very broad brush about some of the opportunities and the challenges. Anurag, can we hear you now? If you'd like to jump in, otherwise I shall carry on. No, unfortunately, I can't hear you, Anurag. I don't know what is going on. Avdesh, I'll turn to you now. As Rajiv mentioned, he's impressed with the speed with which charging infrastructure is being set up, and I think that was also one element which made the general public wary of procuring electromobility in the beginning. And I know for a fact, I mean, I'm here in Denmark at the moment, and I can see the amount of vehicles that are on offer. And Rajiv, you're right; they're all quite high end, I would say. But what has fascinated me is the speed with which even the cars are changing. So a model that was that is only a year and a half old is actually already 1.5 to 2 generations later, older in terms of the technology, in terms of charging. So if I have a car that's 1.5 to 2 years old now, I can maximum charge it 80% within whatever, an hour. But today I can charge 100% within 20 minutes, maybe. Yeah. So I'm saying that the evolution is extremely quick, and that must also be a challenge for you, Avadesh, to decide on what charging infrastructure to set up. And every time you implement a new project, the technology has already moved, and you're still constructing what do you call it, a charging setup for Rajiv. So maybe you can expand a bit on some of those challenges and how you're dealing with that in India as well, and how you indeed are calming consumers' angst for not being able to charge when they need and want to charge.
Thanks, Paul, and thanks for inviting. Very interesting questions which you have posed. Personally, for me and for our company, we don't see this as a challenge in terms of adopting to the technology, because what we see that the charging technology is not changing. What is changing is the demand of the vehicle or demand of the OEMs from side, because they want to give their customer the same experience of refueling the energy of the battery at the same rate as they are getting into the ICE vehicles. So that's the larger objective, I would say, the end goal of the OEMs. And as a supporting partners, as a charge point operators, obviously our objective is to see that we should deploy such hardware, such software, which can ultimately support OEMs rolling out the latest vehicles, because the real technology lies there, and not exactly in the charging, but the real technology lies in the vehicles, because there they have to meet the demand of the customers, as Rajiv has pointed out, that from 70 kilometer to 500 kilometer. So obviously they have to pack that much of energy, but at the same time at an affordable price. So if we see from that perspective, if we see from that lens, what exactly as a charge point operator we have to do? We have to obviously be aware of what is happening in the on the OEM side. Unfortunately, this car industry is something, or the automobile industry is something where most of the things are very, very confidential. Hardly you come to know that what is exactly happening at the OEM front, and they rarely share, except for you get some glimpse in the auto shows. But then you have to be clearly aware of what is happening there. So in terms of the charging infrastructures, when we started, there was a couple of, I would say, the limited car segment, and they have a specific technology of the charging, or I would say the charging standards, which was not prevalent anywhere in the world. So that was a unique problem for us, or unique situations for us. Obviously, as a charge point operator, we had to set up the charging stations, which was catering to those set of vehicles, because those were the only existing or the probable set of customers which we would get. But the sooner we realize, because we that the industry is moving towards a different segment altogether, and they move toward the CCS2 standards. So it means that they wanted to move to the 50 kilowatt, 100 kilowatt, 200 kilowatt of charging speed, instead of the 15 kilowatt, which was more suitable for these early set of the cars. And immediately we started setting up those charging infrastructure. So the first public charging infrastructure of 50 kilowatt we set up in 2019 itself. At that point of time, you didn't have any car of that configurations in the market. Subsequently, Hyundai was launched, MG was launched, Tata Nexon come much later. But then now almost all the manufacturers are following the similar protocol. So from our point of view, what we believe that the charging technology is not going to be obsolete, because whatever chargers we have deployed, at that point of time, whatever car was purchased, that would continue to be user of those charging infrastructure. Now, whatever new cars are coming in, what we have to do, we have to deploy the chargers which is not only catering to this current breed of the vehicles, but the future breed of the vehicles. And we have the advantage that we bring those knowledge from the Norway, where we operate, is that now they are setting up 350 kilowatt chargers because the vehicle demands 150 kilowatt, 200 kilowatt of power. Now, obviously, then since we have that knowledge, we have that expertise, we have that learnings, that what goes in installing those 350 kilowatt chargers or 200 kilowatt chargers, we can easily adapt to the Indian conditions as and way we feel that the OEMs are pushing for that. And if you see in Indian OEMs, kudos to them. I mean, Rajiv referred to the BMW, Mercedes, and Audis. All of them are rolling out the product which requires high power, 100 kilowatt, 150 kilowatt power. So, our viewpoint, and for that matter, any charge point operator should look not from these 15, 20, 50 kilowatt chargers, but they should look for a modular chargers where they can set up, the entire infrastructure for 200 kilowatt power, and they can ramp it up from 50 to 100 to 150 to 200 without dismantling the entire infrastructure for catering to the future breed of the vehicles. So that is something that should be the objective of the any charge point operator, and that is how we are operating. But I would like to emphasize a couple of points which the government of India has done on the EV charging infrastructure. So one was a very, very important, was that they de-licensed the entire activities, because initially there was a thought that the charging infrastructure could be an extension of distribution business. Then essentially it would have been a licensed business in India, and that would not have been very, very favorable for adoption of the electric vehicle. So the government made it very clear that this is anybody can set up the charging infrastructure, they don't require to go for a license. That was the biggest reform, I would say, in terms of creating this ecosystem. The second thing which the the governments as well as the regulators has done is that they have created a separate tariff category for the electric vehicles, right? Because otherwise there was a danger that it would be clubbed as a commercial or industrial connections, and then the input price would have been very, very high. So that would have made the end user's price was very much on the higher side, and that would have created a deterrence for the adoption of the electric vehicle. So that was the second, I would say, the biggest positive step which the government and the regulators have done, is to create that separate EV tariff. And the third, which will be a revolutionary, which is in the making, it has not been notified yet, but I believe that in couple of months this should be completing the process and should be done, is to access the fueling or the energizing all the chargers with the green power. Currently, as per the current electricity regulations, we have a threshold of 1 megawatt to draw power from the open access. Now, the same thing is being now modified, that if you want to draw power from solar, wind, hydro, or any green power, the threshold is being brought down from 1 megawatt to 100 kilowatt. This is irrespective of whether it is used for electric vehicle or this is used for your own consumptions or for any other purposes. But this is something which is a fantastic for the electric vehicles, because even if there is some merit, though I don't agree to that point at all, but there are naysayers who says that as long as electric vehicle is being fueled from the fossil fuel energy, what is the fun? But having my reservations on that statement, but I'm saying that this stipulation of Ministry of Power will even change that perceptions, because then as a CPO, 100 kilowatt power we can source from open access through the solar, through the wind, and then it means that you are driving a complete green vehicles. So I will take a pause here, and then I'll be happy to have more questions here.
Thank you, Avadesh. Interesting insights. Anurag, are you able to be audible now? Yes, now we hear you. Welcome.
Yeah. So, Rajiv, a question to you. You're already having a fairly large EV fleet, and you have a lot of aspirations to even increase that fleet. What are the practical challenges you are facing in running EVs today?
Good to have you back, Anurag. We were beginning to miss your questions. uh, I'll tell you, we as a company have, of course, our board has mandated that within the next 12 months time, which is by March of 23, we would transition our entire fleet from IC fleets to the EV fleet. And that is not only because we feel that we need to save the carbon footprints, which is an important objective that we have, but equally important is the fact that we believe that the future of our business, the future of the mobility industry, the commercial car business in India, which is as large as about 1.6 million cars that ply here. The future is all EV because the economics make sense, and therefore we have decided that we will move into the EV fleet completely. In terms of challenges, frankly, as I said, the challenge currently, and some of the audience would probably be a little bit surprised that the problem is not about my wanting to transition. The problem is about my getting the number of vehicles that I need to get to transition. As of now, there is a supply constraint. The vehicles are not available, and the vehicle non-availability itself is a massive challenge. The second problem, as I mentioned briefly earlier in my inputs, what is also happening is that we obviously in the mobility space, and now the entire mobility industry runs on an asset light model. So we have these driver partners, vendor partners, who all want to shift from their IC vehicles to the EV vehicles, but they have all gone through a terrible time during the pandemic. So they have a challenge in getting a new vehicle funded today, and the banking system is still struggling to figure out as to how do they fund. And while we are providing them all the support that is required, we are also we have worked out strategic arrangements with some of the banks and financial institutions to get this funding. This funding and the availability of vehicles is something where some of the cars, our driver partners have done the bookings for the last 2 months, and the cars are still not visible because the basic car, which is in that 15 lakh range, which is like $20,000 kind of range, that there is only one car model that is available in India, and that one manufacturer, while Tata Motors has been trying its very best to increase the production, but the availability of that car model is very, very limited. I think they have just a few hundred cars available every month, and the demand is far bigger. These are two issues which are a challenge. The third issue, of course, which is where Avdesh and I, we are both trying to find solutions, is that in the big cities, and in the big cities in India, within the city limits, highways is a different ball game, but within the city limits, finding locations where charge points can be set up itself is a big challenge, because cities like Mumbai and Bangalore and even Delhi, that itself is something which will create some amount of challenge. But I think that challenge, hopefully, with the kind of commitment that the charge point companies have, and I must compliment Avdesh for the commitment that Fortham has on that issue, and some of the others have. That issue, I am sure, will get sorted out. Avdesh was just mentioning about this whole thing about having a module based charge point, which you can increase the power from 50 kilowatt to 100 kilowatt to 150 to 200 kilowatt. But there is another very interesting thing that is happening. I mean, in today's papers only, I was reading, uh, one of the things that has happened is that already charge points have started getting established, where in one location there are 100 charge points. On highways and on some of the other locations, now there is talk of setting up 500 charge points in one location, one premises. Now, I mean, that is also an effort, and I would say that's an effort by the charge point industry to give to the consumer the ability to be able to charge from these fast chargers, that any number of them can come, and the average amount of time that they will have to spend will be the same, because you see, the same number of cars will be able to charge from that location, like they are able to fuel from a fuel station in a day. And some of those developments are taking place. I also think that the kind of policies that the government is implementing, and again, Avdesh did mention about some of them. Those policies are revolutionary in nature. I think the commitment that the government has to promote this, and all the state governments also are coming out with policies to support this industry, is going to deal with these challenges, and they will get sorted out.
All right, thank you, Rajiv. I think we lost Anurag for some reason again. Apologies for that from my side. No, but thank you again for listing out some of the challenges, and I agree. There's been a big push from government, and I'm hoping to see that also hit the ground, and it's encouraging to hear both of you say that things are happening, and it's going in the right direction. I have maybe a completely I'm not saying unrelated question, but I'm kind of interested, because now we're talking about mobility of people, of passengers. I was wondering if you see any perspective in terms of commercial vehicles, because in terms of carbon emissions, that's one of the large contributors. The logistics, the cargo movements on trucks. Is that within the vicinity? I mean, are we seeing light at the end of that tunnel that could be topical? Electrical mobility for commercial movements?
So, Paul, I think even I think you're talking about the entire logistics sector. Now, in the logistics, if you look at the last mile delivery, as I mentioned, that last mile delivery is already transitioning significantly into electric
Yeah.
vehicles, and there are some very good vehicles that have come in which can take a load of up to 1 ton, and so that has begun to happen, and I think that is beginning to move at a very fast pace. As far as the larger vehicles are concerned, larger commercial vehicles which can move from one city to another city, I think that is something where the progress is still to be made. I think the focus there initially is on passenger mass movement, and therefore the adoption of buses is something which is being worked upon. But as far as the trucks are concerned, that's an area where we are still to see some
Mm.
significant movement. Of course, some of the manufacturers, including Ashok Leyland and Tata Motors, have started making investments and coming up with some vehicles, but larger numbers, I think, will take a little bit of time.
Okay, thank you, Rajiv.
Avdesh can add something to this.
I was going to ask our just now, yeah?
Yeah, see, I support what Rajiv said, that three-wheelers, logistics segment, especially the LCV side, they are migrating now, and they have a valid use case for this one. And we ourselves on our charging stations, we have been seeing that some of the logistic play. And the interesting part on the logistic side is that the LCV side, that they have started utilizing the infrastructure which were created for four-wheeler passenger vehicle of the first generation. So because I mean, you had raised these questions that what will happen to those infrastructure which you had installed in the early days. Yes, from the passenger vehicle segment, yes, that is going to be, I would say, no new setup is required, but there is a new segment which is likely to come up, and that is on the LCB side, because they have around 6 to 10 kilowatt hour of battery, and they also require a fast charging. And there, some of the OEMs have, or the battery manufacturers have supported that it can be charged at the faster rate, or preferably at the 15 kilowatt DC001 chargers. So that's where it is happening. But on the big format, buses is already being adopted in mass in India. That's a foregone conclusion that the buses is electrified across the country. But as far as truck is concerned, globally truck is still far behind. There has been few experiments, but then generally the consensus is that the large format vehicles like trucks, probably they are a good candidate case for hydrogen than the battery. And once the hydrogen becomes a mature, or the commercially scalable, probably you will see the truck going on the mass electrification at that point of time using this fuel cell technology. So that's what we believe.
Right. Yeah, I hear you. I think that makes a lot of sense, Avadesh. Yeah. So thanks for that. I wanted to ask both of you in terms of innovation in business model, whether in ownership of the cars, whether in procurement, of electricity by way of charging. Is anything on the anvil, anything that you wanted to highlight that's really clever, that's something that should be bounced upon, that's something maybe that should be picked up by government to incentivize? Is there anything you wanted to highlight?
Paul, on the government side, I would like to share with you what has happened over the last 3-4 years, and particularly on the cars which are used by the government organizations and public sector undertakings across India. Uh, if you remember, 3-4 years, 4 years back, uh, government agency called EESL, they came
Mm.
out with a tender which was to give a big boost to transfer, adoption of electric vehicles by government organizations across India. And they did come out with tenders for some 10,000 vehicles at that point of time. In fact, I think that was one of the triggers for Tata Motors to get into electric vehicle manufacturing in a hurry. I think what that did is that it brought electric vehicles and electric cars to the forefront in terms of media attention, in terms of public asking questions about what this is, how this will
Mm.
happen. And while only 1,600 odd cars were actually inducted, but what it did was that it took cars, electric cars, to over 100 government organizations across India, where these cars were used by people. They had some charger there where they charged these cars. People, the drivers had an experience of this car. And I will tell you how this model has now transitioned. So after that experience, and whatever happened to that experience, they decided to pause. And what the government is now doing, they of course have one more entity which is now called CESL, which is of course a part of ESL. This entity is now taking the role of only an aggregator of government demand. And while what happened 3-4 years back was that many of the government organizations took one car or two cars or three cars, now if you see the demand from each of those government organizations where one or two or three cars were sent, and the, uh, uh,
Mm.
They were also not great cars because the battery range was low, the consumer experience was not great. But even then, today, the same government organizations in the aggregation model by CESL, they are placing demand for hundreds of vehicles and wanting
Yeah.
to position significant part of their total fleet within the next 1 year. And in reality, the CESL now believes that through this aggregation model, they will be able to induct over 10,000 cars within the next financial year. What, of course, this is also doing in the mobility industry. While some of this has probably also happened because of the pandemic and not necessarily EVs. But as far as the EVs are concerned, again, the initial set of players which came into the mobility industry, they all came with asset heavy models. They all were
Yeah.
purchasing cars, they all were setting up their own charging stations. But what has happened now, and we follow this model completely, is a completely asset light model where you have the ability to scale up and help the driver partners to acquire these cars. They own and manage the cars,
Mm.
but help them acquire the cars at the best price, help them get the funding from the financial institutions, help them get the energy from partners like the Fortum, help them get all the things, and of course deliver them the business so that they can all make good money. But they should not have to worry about a lot of the things
Yeah.
which they would otherwise worry. So take over all those worries from them, support them, and build a scalable model. Just to mention to you, we have in the past had our largest fleet of about 8,000 vehicles. We believe that through this model, we should be able to multiply that fleet by maybe 4 or 5 times in the next 5 years. So that's the kind of scale that is possible on EVs if you have the right business model in place.
Yeah. Okay. I understand. That's a very, very, very interesting. Uh, Awadesh, I was also thinking about. I know that there's been some hype. Maybe there still is on battery swapping, and I know that might be an OEM question or whatever. But I also know a lot of the market saying, "Hey, I'm not going to buy a new car for that much money," and then I have a brand new battery, and the first time I go and swap my battery, I get some conked off battery that's 2 or 3 years old and doesn't comply with what I need to do. Is that something? Maybe Fortum as a charging solution provider could say, okay, we'll own the batteries, we'll ensure that the batteries are quality, and swap it. I know it's a bigger thing for two-wheelers and maybe tuk-tuk, so auto rickshaws and three-wheelers than for four-wheelers because batteries become too heavy. And in some places I've seen that it does work, but what is your thoughts on a model like that, for instance?
See, on theoretical level, the battery swapping sounds perfect, because this solves one of the major problem of spending time at the
Exactly.
field, because you will be spending around 5 minutes and then you are done. But then the theory ends there itself as far as four-wheeler segment is concerned. The reason what we believe, there are two things which we need to understand in the battery swapping for the four-wheeler passenger vehicles. One is that the configuration of the batteries in the four-wheeler, it's probably many of the people who are not directly associated with the manufacturing of the vehicles, they believe that the battery swapping means that we can hold the battery by hand and we can remove it and replace it. In the four-wheeler car, the battery is not like you can hold it because the battery is placed under the chassis, right? So this, you require to have a special mechanism to remove those battery from the underbelly of the vehicles and then replace it. So obviously what essentially it requires, and that the weight of the battery, and the currently, the standard battery or the vehicles has a 30 kilowatt hour of battery. Now, this is the minimum, I'm talking of the minimum battery size. Now, 30 kilowatt, depending upon the chemistry, which they use, the weight might be varying from 250 kg to 300 kg. Now, so you need to have the entire robotic system or automated process to remove this battery from underneath, and then the battery swapping mechanism where the battery is getting charged and then fit into the car and put it back into the system. So that is something which is a complicated process, which can be done, but it has an additional cost. Besides, the battery itself is a 50% of the cost as of now, as people are saying that the battery comprises around 45 to 50%. So 50% of the cost the battery swapping operator is absorbing, and they are also putting an additional cost on the infrastructure which they have to create for this one, and also requiring a huge amount of expertise in handling these schemes. So we believe that so this is one aspect. Now the problem with this challenge is that the battery technology itself is changing very fast, right? Not tomorrow, if the battery technology changes to a different chemistry, then what do you do with these batteries, which you have invested huge amount there? If it is fitted in the car, if it comes fitted with the car, so it means as long as the car is there, those battery requires charging by standalone chargers. But if it is a battery swapping, so these are the different interplay complexities involved, which four-wheeler segment we believe is not a good use case, though some of the manufacturers outside India, have demonstrated that the car can have a battery swapping. But we need to see, and there is a same case in the better place in Israel, which has invested $1 billion US and got bankrupt in the battery swapping. So we have a both side of things, and the battery swapping we have to see that whether it works or not. But in India, two-wheeler and three-wheeler is a good case where you can go straight away for the battery swapping.
All right, thank you, Avadish. And I think we've also crossed the 45 minutes, even with the delay we had in the beginning. So if I may, if there's nothing that either of you would like to add to the audience, something enthralling, something enticing, then I would like to thank you both very much for joining us. I'm thanking you as EBDC, as well as on behalf of Primus Partners, who unfortunately could only partake for part of this session due to technical issues. My apologies for that. We certainly missed out on a few insightful questions, I believe, from Anurag, but we'll catch up on that at some other time. And thank you very much for joining me for if not a fireside chat, then a computer side chat. So good to see you both again, and once again, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you so much. Thank you.